We have leverage. We hold the cards. It would be nice if they would show maybe a little bit of gratitude and make a free and fair deal with the U.S. Here with reaction, White House Deputy Chief for Policy, Homeland Security Advisor Stephen Miller. Look, I love our friends in Canada. I do. But and as the president really interestingly always says, I don't blame them for ripping off America and our predecessors because they allowed it to happen. However, if you're going to be a good ally, we should have free and fair trade, especially with Canada. They should control their northern border. They should contribute their fair share to NATO. These are not draconian requests that we have here.
Well, first of all, I had the pleasure of getting to be at the meeting today between the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of Canada. What I witnessed was like watching a grandmaster in chess perform. President Trump has opened up a completely new relationship with Canada because of his strength and because of his diplomacy. The Prime Minister of Canada talked about finally contributing their fair share to our nation's defense, or to NATO's defense, finally contributing and meeting that minimum of 2% benchmark and climbing up from there so they're not a free rider with the United States anymore. He talked about achieving fair trade with the United States and acknowledged, the Prime Minister of Canada acknowledged the need to strike a fair trade deal with the United States, as President Trump has long asked for. He emphasized, the Prime Minister of Canada, his deployment of troops and guards to the Canadian border at President Trump's request to keep fentanyl out of the United States of America. It's just one concrete win after another because of President Trump's leadership on this issue. And President Trump kept emphasizing two words. We want friendship with Canada, but we also insist upon and demand fairness from Canada. And President Trump will continue to hold fast to that requirement.
All right, let's look around the globe. The president has taken on really big issues of international security. We seem to be at the point with the Ukrainians making the mineral deal with the president that the ball is now in Putin's court. And Crimea was annexed in 2014. That's off the table. Probably the Donbass region, which had been heavily populated by Russians anyway, that probably is not part of the deal. However, there will be security guarantees for Ukraine. They will have money through the minerals deal to rebuild their country. Between that and the latest in Gaza, the Middle East, and this upcoming trip, can you give us a preview of that, too?
Yes, well, so when President Trump left the White House in 2021, the world was at peace. Peace in Europe, peace in Asia, peace in the Middle East. President Trump comes back 4 years later after 4 years of Democrat rule and Biden rule. And we have war in Israel and Gaza. We have Iran marching towards a nuclear weapon and spreading instability around the globe. We have the Houthis in Yemen that are shooting at our ships, shooting at our technology, shooting at passenger and commercial vessels, right? We have China increasingly on the rise, stealing American industry, stealing American technology. You go all, and of course we have the disastrous war in Ukraine. War after war, conflict after conflict, problem after problem. President Trump comes in and immediately begins taking action to fix each and every one of these fires that the Democrats started, that Joe Biden started. So we are pursuing, under President Trump's vision and leadership, as you mentioned, a path towards peace in Europe. And very important, that mineral deal will repay the United States over time for all of the money that it has spent on that war. Of course, we're all familiar with the steps President Trump has taken and is taking to deal with the threat of a nuclear-armed Iran. Just today, President Trump announced that the Houthis have said that they will not shoot at American ships, they will not shoot at American military as a result of the bombardment campaign that President Trump authorized and led. A major victory for U.S. foreign policy. And now President Trump is about to head out on his first foreign trip as a state-level trip to Saudi Arabia after taking the oath of office. And I mean, obviously, he went on the foreign trip for the funeral, but the first foreign diplomatic trip since becoming president. And that trip is going to emphasize not only the incredible commercial deals and investment in the United States as a result of President Trump's economic agenda and a result of his unleashing of American prosperity, but will also lay out the framework that President Trump led in his first term towards peace and security, towards fighting violent extremism and uniting with countries around the globe in our shared interests of harmony and stability and security. And that's another example of how President Trump is continuing to lead the entire world towards a more secure future after 4 years of fire, flame, and disaster under Joe Biden.
From the three countries he'll be going to see, combined $3 trillion in promised investments over the next 4 years, a massive amount on top of $5 trillion.
Huge win for America.
It's huge. I mean, trillions of dollars, that's hundreds and
Under
hundreds
President
of thousands
Trump,
of.
everyone wants to do business in America, Sean. Everyone wants to do business here. Low regs, low taxes, cheap energy, and a winning president. Everyone wants to do business now in America, Sean.
Stephen Miller, great to have you as always.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.